The storm rolled in from the north without warning, sweeping down across the barren Wyoming flats like a living thing, the kind of storm that could strip a man's skin and bury a body in snow before the church bell even finished tolling. And Abigail Fletcher, known around Pine Hollow as the Lonely Widow, ever since cholera took her husband and baby boy 3 winters back, had just finished boarding her barn when she saw it. A dark figure staggering up the ridge toward her place, leaning heavy against the wind as though each step might be his last. She almost turned away, because out here in the West, taking in strangers could be the difference between life and death. And not always in your favor. But then the man crumpled into the snow just past her gate, and her legs carried her forward before her mind could stop them. He was tall, lean beneath a torn duster, his face gaunt and raw from the cold, a week's worth of stubble hiding a sharp jaw, and slung across his back was a weathered canvas sack tied with rawhide. When she tried to haul him up, his eyes, gray like steel under cloud, snapped open and he rasped, "You save me, you'll regret it," before going limp again. Her heart hammered, but leaving a man to freeze wasn't in her blood, so she dragged him into her cabin, stripped the frozen coat from his shoulders, and laid him near the hearth. It took the better part of the night to bring color back to his skin, spooning broth past his cracked lips, but by dawn he was breathing steady. For 2 days he said little, only watching her with a wariness that spoke of years lived on the wrong side of trust, until on the 3rd morning, he stood, slung the sack over one shoulder, and said he'd be gone before night. That was when she noticed how he kept the bag close, never letting it leave his sight, even when he slept. Until fate forced her hand. A trio of riders thundered into the yard just before dusk, faces hidden under dusters, revolvers in hand, demanding to know if she'd seen a man matching his description. She lied without hesitation, saying no stranger had come this way, and they left after warning her about harboring outlaws. When the sound of hooves faded, she turned to find him standing there, jaw tight, eyes full of something unreadable. He said nothing, just set the sack on the table and walked outside into the snow. The urge to know clawed at her until she untied the rawhide and opened it, and froze in shock. Inside were stacks of US banknotes, more money than she'd seen in her life, alongside a small, battered locket. The money was bound in the paper of the Wyoming Territory Treasury, stamped with an official seal, and the locket, when she opened it, held a tiny portrait of a woman and child. The child no more than 2, the woman smiling in a way that spoke of deep love. She didn't hear him come back in, but his voice was low when he said, "Now you know why they'll kill me, and anyone who helps me." He told her the money wasn't stolen from banks or folks, but from a corrupt territorial governor who'd bled ranchers and miners dry with fake taxes, skimming half into his own pocket while letting towns rot. The man, Caleb Ryder, had been the governor's enforcer, until he'd discovered the truth and taken the ledger, the cash, and the proof of every theft to bring to the U.S. Marshal in Cheyenne. The woman and child in the locket were his sister and nephew, murdered by the governor's hired guns to keep him quiet. Abigail's hands shook as she realized that by saving him, she'd stepped into a war she hadn't asked for. Over the next week, riders returned twice more, and each time she and Caleb fought them off together, her with the old Winchester her husband had left, him with a revolver that never seemed to miss. In the quiet moments between danger, they talked, and she saw in him not just a hunted man, but someone broken and yet unyielding, someone who carried grief the way she carried hers. When at last the thaw came and it was time for him to ride to Cheyenne, she packed bread and jerky, and against every sensible instinct, told him she was coming. Because she'd spent too long in silence, and maybe helping him finish this fight was the first thing in years that felt like living. Together they rode out, the sack between them, and she didn't know if they'd see another sunrise, but she knew she wouldn't regret saving him. And if you, friend, believe there's still a place for grit, loyalty, and risking it all for what's right, then don't just ride on. Subscribe now, because the trail ahead is full of Wild West tales that'll remind you why some fights are worth every ounce of danger.